And this is a treat for me because it's a longtime friend. Johnny, how long have we known each other?
I would say it's got to go back to the late 90s. So
Wow.
20, approaching 25 years.
For you kids, that was the century before this one in the 90s. Yeah, we both had a lot more hair then. Um, yeah, John and I worked together for years at Alcon Labs way back in the day, and even back then, you were doing some pretty neat things with leadership and development. That department for Alcon was probably world class before such things really were maybe the norm. That department was really doing some great things, mainly because of you. And here we are, this many years later. You've got a new program that you and I just were chatting about one day. This is an idea you had that you've actually put into effect, and it's really cool. And it's unlike anything that I've seen um, as an offering from anybody else, which is pretty exciting. So we're getting an early look at this, and the name of the program is Covered Bridge. And before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what the program is, what spurred the idea?
And as I was thinking about spending some time with you today, I was reflecting on that, and uh, you know, as as many of the folks that I've worked with before know that I'm a daydreamer, and I was daydreaming one afternoon and thinking, how cool would it be not to have to travel to work? And then so I thought, what would it be like to be able to bring people close, and where might a gap exist in the current market? Um, and so that's really kind of what I sort of stumbled on this idea that, we put so much time and emphasis and energy and resources into the onboarding of people into organizations. And I just, there's this kind of opposite end of that in terms of offboarding for people who are some of your best tenured and seasoned folks, um, that there's no kind of offboarding process. And that's kind of where the idea started. It's evolved pretty significantly since then, where it's turned from the initial sort of idea of how do I make my life easier to actually when I uncovered in doing a lot of research over the last pretty close to a year, including lots of interviews and conversations, that there's a whole lot more to it than what meets the eye when someone goes into retirement or makes that transition in life. And the more that I understood, and the more that I understood the impact that it has on human life,
Hmm.
the more I became invested in this project, and think this is the right time in my life for it.
It's funny because I can remember retirement's not going to be an option for me for several years, I'm sure, but um, there's always been the joke. Some people will say, well, retirement, that guy will never be able to retire. It's just not in his DNA. He did, his job is his identity basically. And I know people like that too. They love to work. They absolutely love it. But there comes a time when maybe it's not just your choice. There comes a time when, you're going to be either, your role is going to be maybe cut back a little bit. Maybe you're going to be minimized a little bit, be a consultant, that kind of thing. But that can be a big a mental blow to you if that is truly, if your identity is wrapped up in your profession and that's going away. That's pretty traumatic for some people, and that's why I think I know you included some of this in here in the packet that we reviewed about now mental health is such a uh, I guess it's very topical, especially with the pandemic and everything, what it's done to so many people. Well, people who are moving out of a profession too, it may have been expedited by this whole thing. I think it's a problem, and especially for the people who have given so many years to the company.
Yeah, I think you raise a couple of important ideas. I think the first is just the way that we even think about retirement. This is we've evolved many generations since the idea that people would have pensions and retirement comes at 65 or 67, and Social Security kicks in, and life is good. You kind of cruise off to the sunset, and I think you're right. There are a lot of people by DNA that don't see themselves retired in the historical version or historical context of retirement, which is, in my opinion, putting me out to pasture and waiting for death. right? And there's a whole lot more to it than that, right? The First of all, the idea that there are a lot of people who are financially able now to retire significantly earlier,
Mhm.
and those who are of the more traditional retirement age, that you're absolutely right. They don't necessarily want to stop working, but I think there's a deeper question there, and that's why is that? Is that because they're incredibly compelled to do their work, or is that because they don't know what the hell they're going to do afterwards? And what we found is that the research shows that people spend more time planning. This is including financial planning for retirement. They spend more time planning for their weddings than they do their retirement. So understanding the the statistics with weddings and successful marriages, you can
Right.
imagine, right, what happens on the other side of that, where there's no preparation other than potentially financially, no preparation for what you identified, which are these tethers that hold us. Identity being one of them. The other three that I sort of latched onto in my research was purpose, connection, and community. All of those things change. And they change in any life transition, but in particular with the number of people who are entering retirement age and the opportunity to have a significant impact on that group. Uh, it's something that excites me a lot. And you brought up mental health. There's a huge opportunity around mental health with that group of people.
So, what is the program like?
So yeah, it's a essentially it's an intentional pause, right? We as very busy worker bees have a tendency not just to stop to think very often, and this is just an intentional pause for people who are approaching retirement. And you'll hear that I'm kind of describe it in a vague way because from organization to organization, some of these things may be different, right? Where this is an offering in some organizations for those who are 55 plus, a senior director level for 3+ years in good standing, right? That might be someone's definition. Another might be that, look, you've been an account manager for us for 35 years, and as part of our commitment to you and the commitment to the work that you put into the organization, at the point in time you decide it's the right time for you to part ways, or we decide it's the right time to part ways. We want to do it in a manner that is both reflective of the loyalty that has been demonstrated by the employee, and also the significance of the work that people put in over that period of time. So with that said, it's essentially an immersive program where over the course of, depending again on the company, 3 to 5 days of essentially a retreat, right? It's one of the things that in our business we've learned how to do, I think, pretty well, is how to take people away, give them an opportunity to think, give them some things to think about, give them an opportunity to connect with each other, and come back with as in some way some level of evolution. And so there will be a number of different elements to the program. Primary curriculum. There will be traditional classroom as well as journaling and reflection, small group conversations, some expert panels. And essentially, what we'll do is by the end of the week, create a roadmap, a plan of action for people who are entering that stage of their lives, and offer a 6 month, essentially 6 months of coaching that follows that. And I say coaching loosely. This is really guidance and assistance in executing your plan of action to retirement in those four areas around identity, purpose, connection, and community.
And so if you're, it really does, like if you're getting to that point in your career where retirement's even an option, it sure does take a lot of the fear factor away from it, I would think. If you're, you know, were given some examples of some of the things that would, I mean, any number of experts could visit. It could be somebody for financial planning or estate planning, or you could have a pickleball coach come in and teach them the the ways of pickleball. But because a lot of I don't think, I know for a fact I've not seen this program or anything similar to this. And when you see people that are transitioning out or they actually announce their retirement, they kind of become sort of they're almost not an entity anymore. They're just sort of walking around. People think of them as, well, he's retiring. He's just sort of punching the clock for now. In this program, there's a lot of value given back to the company too. That really engages all the what do they call it? It's the privileged knowledge, I guess, they've acquired over the years.
Yeah, again, this is gonna depend on from company to company how much investment they want to put into this. But you're absolutely right. When you think about someone who approaches that point in their careers and their tenure, where we should be holding them up on a pedestal and gleaning every possible moment we have with them prior to their retirement. What ends up happening, they become a lame duck. You're absolutely right. They lose their voting privileges. They
Yeah.
lose their control, their power, right? And they kind of sit back and wait for the inevitable to come, which is that date of retirement. Um, Sort of the way that we've thought through it. Originally, we were putting a lot of emphasis into systems and processes that we would create to be able to retain tribal knowledge and the key internal and external relationships that people have and those kinds of things. And what we recognize is that every organization is so different as it relates to that kind of that space. And so really where we see the two areas of opportunity are around succession and culture.
Hmm.
So as a supplement to succession, being able to accurately predict when retirements are coming so that you can thoughtfully prepare. So John, to your point, you've got you go and you say, hey, look, I'm gonna go ahead and retire. The organization doesn't necessarily know what to do with you, which is why you're left on an island. But imagine having the opportunity then to be able to say, okay, well, then your development plan for the next 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, whatever that period of time is, your development plan is going to include these key things, including mentoring potential successors or those who are in the same area of the business to be able to transition some of that work. Um, I don't know what your experience is with mentoring programs, but I have yet to see a mentoring program that really kicks ass. And that's often, I think, because people don't really know what to talk about. They don't really know what to mentor on. And if they did, like, hey, look, I've got 6 months left in the organization. I'm going to pour into you everything I can every couple of weeks. Then you got something to talk about. And so we really think it has a real potential to have an impact both on succession and on culture because now you're investing in that offboarding, you're incentivizing, some of your best who may be in their 50s or early 60s from going to a startup or going to a competition or taking their wares on their own and incentivizing them to stay, especially when we expect the storyline around the Cover Bridge program to be a very strong one. And so that is again, as it relates to culture, we know that stories drive culture. If you've got a positive story around that retirement process and the idea that people aren't necessarily being put out to pasture, but some of them are on to what we're going to call encore occupations, and others are on to take the things that they've learned to nonprofit boards and those kinds of things. Imagine what kind of impact we could have on the world if we had so many talented people out doing good things in the next step in their journey.
Yeah, a lot of it is just not even knowing where the opportunities are. I mean, you just mentioned a couple things, involvement in some boards and charities and churches, and I mean, there's so many things you can do because you've still got a lot of gas in the tank. Most people still have some in there, and you know what? Maybe you are ready to be retired and not have to do a 40, 50, 60 hour a week anymore. That's okay too. Um, there's still passions that you need to identify to really, you've seen it when people don't have much to get up for. That's when it goes downhill quite rapidly.
Yeah, that's what's really struck me, and the driver for me in this no longer is do I have to travel. The driver for me is how do we impact people's lives in a meaningful way. The statistics are staggering. 40%. There's a 40% increase in depression rates in the first years of retirement, and of those retirees, 61% report feeling somewhat or always alone. Um, that's a really
61%? Is that what you said?
61%. Yeah, it's really scary. They're really scary statistics. In the age group of 48 to 65, which is what we're seeing right now with groups of people that are retiring. That's also the age of the highest suicide rate. And the National Institute of Health actually recognizes retirement as a contributing cause.
Oh, wow.
So this is some serious stuff we're talking about. This is not just let's do something nice for people on their way out the door. This is how do we preserve and protect, which is why we landed on the idea of covered bridge. For those who are familiar with covered bridges, and oftentimes they're found in places like the northeastern part of the United States where winter and weather conditions can be very harsh. That the covered bridge is there to protect both the trellis of the bridge, the inner workings of the bridge itself, but also the traveler. And the idea here is how do we protect the traveler and take them from the tethers of identity, connection, community, and purpose, those tethers that they have in their current world, and be able to make that transition so they don't lose those tethers moving into the next phase of their lives.
So I'm going to say something here. You said community and purpose, and one thing that we have to catch you up on is that we've become addicted to pickleball, which was once a retirement sport, and now it's moving. Well, the growth has
It's more mainstream.
Yeah. But it rapidly increased over COVID when people were looking for things to do. So maybe perhaps part of your program could be some pickleball in the evenings. Get these people involved in something that is a new activity that they can carry into their retirement.
So, are
Well,
you selling to our
I'm
guests?
selling the fact
I
that we
love it.
can
I'm
put
buying.
on
I'm buying.
a pickleball. I'm telling you, because you talk about support and community, and that's what pickleball is.
Well, Karen, I love that. I love that you brought that up. Because again, if you think about it in the working state, the connections that we have are typically the people that we work with or those that we're affiliated with work, the third party folks. And then our communities are typically built at least around the work week. Even if they're not built around the work people, they're built around the work week. So for those who are involved in their churches and they get involved on Sundays or on the weekends and maybe a weeknight, um, and those who are, play golf on Saturdays with their friends, there's a whole lot of time in that Friday that all of a sudden people sit there and they're looking in the mirror like, what am I doing? And
Mhm.
you're so right that that having a group of people to connect with and share more than just pushing a ball from one side of the net to the other,
Right.
but the joy and the laughter and you think about the chemical responses of serotonin and dopamine and all of the oxytocin, all of the connector um, uh, chemicals in our systems, and how even something as simple as pickleball, that you got an engagement twice or three times a week that you're looking forward to, and that extends into the conversation afterwards over a beer or a cup of coffee, or right,
Mhm.
and those relationships start to fill that space that there otherwise would be a huge void in. So I appreciate the jest, but at the same time, you're spot on. These are the exact kind of things that if people stop to think ahead of time about, right, they would very easily be able to identify them just based on the things that they like to do. People just
Mhm.
don't stop to do that, and that's what this intentional pause is about.
I'm not retired, but I can kind of relate here. So when I know here, but tie this back to me. Um, when when I lost the company that I was with folded because of COVID, and I was a um, executive that flew all over the country. I had a large team that I managed. I spent, just doing the corporate world, and it came to a halt. And there was an immediate panic in me that I can only imagine these people feel. And I felt I don't even believe I got dressed for 2 weeks. All I did was look for a job. And John said,
There are no naked
just
people in this house.
he said, well, okay, I didn't get out of my pajamas, okay. And and John said, why don't you take a pause and just really reflect and think about what you really want to do? And so I stopped and I did that. And I know, I'm not retired. I'm not that age, but I can relate to that feeling. And then getting used to the quiet, right? I had people, my direct reports calling me all the time. John can say, I felt like my work would never be done. I could never catch up. And then all of a sudden I was caught up and I had no one to talk to. I mean, I'm used to my phone ringing off the hook morning, noon, and night. And now all of a sudden it was silent. And
yeah, getting caught up. Not all it's talked up to be.
I got into podcasting and pickleball.
Right. No, Karen, you raise a number of really interesting points. So the first is that when people stop to think, because there isn't something that's already sort of part of this world that we're living in, they're thinking in a state where they've got cortisol induced brains, right? So
Mhm.
they're in a stress response, a fight or flight response, which we know then leads to a diminished capability of our rational minds, right? And we
Mhm.
start to go to our emotional brains, and we start to go to some of our default behaviors, which might actually may not be the best decisions at that point in time, simply because we're sitting, you're sitting in this pool of cortisol, right? So to be able to do this ahead of time, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months ahead of time, that you're pausing and you're reflecting, and you've got a cadence of that pause and reflection over a period of time, you're that much more likely to make good decisions.
Mhm.
You talk about this restlessness that comes, right? And there's that saboteur of restlessness that gets a lot of us, and I think is part of the fuel that keeps us going at such a high pace in the corporate world, or in the kind of the working world. Um, it doesn't, it's funny when you said that, I started cracking up because I can remember my dad when I was a kid of saying to me, you need to understand how to spend time by yourself. Like, you're gonna have to get comfortable with that. And
Yeah.
and I thought that's the last thing I want to do. And even now, it's sometimes the last thing, right? But I think you're right that, when things settle, that how do you use that quiet time? Do you use that quiet time for meditation or prayer? Do you use that
Mhm.
quiet time for additional reflection, as compared to looking at your inbox and saying, I don't have any emails to respond to? Um, the third point that I think is really interesting about what you said, and bringing up not necessarily retirement, but a transition like that, is that there are a lot of opportunities for the covered bridge above and beyond retirement. You think about pro athletes and Olympic athletes.
Mhm.
Michael Phelps coming out and talking about
Mm.
his battles with depression and such a major life transition. That the identity is, I'm an athlete, I'm an athlete, I'm an athlete, and then I retire. Who am I? Right?
Hmm.
Right. Right.
That's real. You put that in any professional sports, college sports, people, guys and women who are coming out of college thinking that they might have a shot, and they don't get that shot. What do? Right.
Mhm.
So there are so many opportunities. You've got the military, where you've got people who have given their lives to serving our country, and they're now 40 or 45 years old, and not quite sure what to do because they've been a soldier, right? And so I think there are just a lot of opportunities in this space to really help people with life transitions. I think an easier place for us to start is maybe at that retirement space, because of the current demographics and the nature of need.
Yeah. And the other thing, um, I, I, I all of a sudden realized that the company, uh, that I wasn't that important either, right? The company survived it, or no, not the company that folded. Sorry, but um, the companies that I've left, right? I thought I was super critical to, you know,
No one's
their
irreplaceable.
success,
We've heard that
and then
before.
so now I'm, without the noise, without the distraction, and now feeling bad because like they went on without me, right? They didn't need me to survive. And so yeah, that was something I had to wrestle with and come to terms with, and it was fine. It set me on a better path. But I love the fact that you're proactively, so I had nothing to help me, no one to help me through that transition. I
Hey,
had to make it through. Well, you did,
yeah, I
but
was kind of
right.
critical, I think.
But
Like she said, she had no one to help with.
no one.
Nice. Nice.
So I
That
love
was
this.
that was too easy. Whit.
Because you're taking a proactive, knowing what the pitfalls of can be for these people. You're taking a proactive approach to help them make that transition and feel good about it and not fall into those numbers that you're throwing out here on depression and
Yes.
something else.
Another such.
I was trying to find my stats here because I think
No,
they're
no,
pretty.
no, no.
I think they're pretty impactful. I mean, you're
No, they're
saying a
compelling.
40% increase in depression rates.
Loneliness, feelings of loneliness, suicide, depression. You know what? I wondered. We'd have to look at some life expectancy
Oh,
studies, right?
healthcare costs. That's the other
Well,
thing.
healthcare costs actually. Glad you brought that up. The healthcare costs for retirees with moderate to severe depression versus those without are 2x.
That's
So
incredible.
again, you look at just healthcare costs to our system, healthcare costs to companies that are extending healthcare benefits and those kinds of things. And Karen, yeah, again, I appreciate that sort of that deep feeling of when I leave an organization, they keep going, right? They move on and they move on really fast. And so for people to think about their reliance on those connections to being there, look, if you're still working and I'm not, you're not going to be there for coffee at 9 in the morning, or you might be, but it's going to be talking about work. And eventually those things start to pass us by a little bit. Um, so I think, if you've got a polluted river and you've got, a bunch of stuff that you've got to clear out the pollution, well, yeah, you can take out the tires and you can take out the debris and all of those things, but um, that's that's great. That's like treating depression. Get that. I think we've got an opportunity to get ahead of this game, to actually go upstream
Mm.
and figure out where are those tires and where's that debris entering, so we can intercept it early, so that we're not dealing with these kinds of things when people hit retirement.
I mean, I even love the tagline. I was reading here on this draft agenda that I wanted to talk to you, but an intentional pause to prepare for life beyond profession. That's fantastic, because it really is. We don't take intentional pauses very much in our life, period. But as if you're doing that with some sort of productive outcome, and I don't want to give away your secret sauce, but you did have a draft agenda, and it's a pretty this program anyway was designed for like 1 week or 3 full days with an arrival day the night before. You've got things like emotional intelligence, you have behavioral styles, you have communication training, you have love languages, you have serial entrepreneur. I mean, these are some really varied and cool. I mean, and you have options, depending on what you want to do and that type of stuff. Um, are these programs, are they going to make connections within the program? Are they colleagues? Or are they coming from different companies? Who are the attendees that are coming?
Yes.
All
So
that.
yeah, yes, all of that. Well, I think right now it really depends on the organization. So we're starting with companies as a starting point, and companies that want to send cohorts, and we're going to be bringing in cohorts of 20 with the choice of bringing a significant other, your plus one in retirement, um, as an option. And there's a reason why there's everything that we've thought about and done with the agenda and with the work is intentional. So it's both intentional in the fact that you know relationships are critical. Uh, those relationships will change in retirement for those who have a significant other at home. Uh, Everything changes on that day of retirement. It really does. But so does the evolution of our bodies and our systems and our wants and needs and those kinds of things, right? So to be able to better understand how to spend time together and how to spend time away from each other in a way that's guilt free, right? To be able to understand how we communicate to each other. This is stuff that, shoot, if we could get to people far earlier in life, again, I think we'd have an impact on relationships in general. But why not make the most of the relationships people have in their retirement years or their post work years, by focusing in on that. And again, if you look carefully at the agenda, um, time around uh, you sort of who am I beyond the professional title that I've held, and who are the connections that I have or I want to establish. Where do I want to establish connections outside of the workforce? All of those things are really focused on kind of beyond, as you said, beyond the professional realm. Um,
I noticed there's no timeshare presentation too, so that's comforting to know you're not going to be selling them
Yeah, but I
timeshares.
see free time from 4:30 to 7 on Wednesday. That could be a pickleball tournament.
Okay,
yeah,
Just
sure
saying.
could
enough.
be. It sure could
Okay,
be.
but I do want to say something that got me thinking when you were talking about being together with your spouse. So that obviously happened for us during COVID. We all of a sudden were co officing in the house, and we see a lot of each other, and we're starting, we've got a little side business that we're doing together, and playing pickleball, and so everything is like all of our worlds came together because of COVID. And it was almost like almost like a, I don't know, crash test
Worlds are
for
colliding.
early retirement, right?
That's what Costanza says. Worlds are colliding.
And amazing. I mean, we made it through, but I can see if you had some major issues, how that would, because I mean, there are times when yes, it becomes annoying, right? And and I feel like when he does go to the office, sometimes I feel like now, which they don't go very often, but how much more I get done. So I can just see like the tug of what retirement would be, for two people, where I mean, it's an adjustment for sure.
Yeah, yeah, no question. Yeah, it, I think the pandemic, I think it introduced that to a lot of people earlier than expected, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
And so I think you certainly speak the truth as it relates to just people and the time, the amount of time that they spend together, but also kind of uh, how we value that time, and also how we value the time when we're not necessarily together. And you know,
mhm,
I'm my wife is a therapist, and her business exploded during the pandemic because you're right. It wasn't just major issues; it was also just minor issues. But minor issues left unattended will become major issues, right?
right.
And so to be able to again not use therapy as the answer, although that could be the answer, but to use the proactive approach of
Mhm,
teaching the things that we know help teams and organizations thrive. Why not do that inside the home for people that are going to be spending that time together for hopefully for a long, long time? So that was again, that was the premise for even both the thought of the work, but also the thought of involving the plus ones in this, because they do play a major role in the lives of they will play a major role in any of our lives.
One thing that's really kind of a benefit of this cohort approach too, or if it's people coming from other companies, which could be equally fun. But when you do get to that point where you retire and like you said, most of our friends, a lot of them are from work and work related. Then you leave, you retire. They're not talking about what you're talking about anymore. You're out. You're out of the loop. You don't understand as much as you want it. It's almost like you want to still keep a prize, like it's a soap opera. It continues. I mean, I know that for 5 years after I left Alcon, I was still keeping up with what was going on, what's happening.
That's right. That's right.
But if you have a group, a cohort, if you have a group of people experiencing this at the same time, then you have a shared experience that you can continue. Now you're building your new story and your new network. So this gets them a head start on that too. I mean, I'm sure that was one of your first thoughts, but it just hit me while we're sitting there. I was like, oh, they're going to have their new pledge class.
mhm.
Basically, they're going to go in. Now they got 20 people. They got spouses. There's going to be some interaction. Chances are some friendships are going to happen that might not have otherwise. And they have some common language now. Whereas they're the friends that are still working, they're going to be there for another 5 years. They'll like them, but they better find their own story to talk about, because the people who are still at the other company, they don't want to talk about whatever it is you're doing. They've got their own problems.
So, Whit, you're smarter than the average bear. I'm going to come back and I'm going to support you on this one for sure. Because the way you just articulated that is, again, yes, there definitely has been intention in the idea of cohort work. We know what that means for people who have been in the workforce and gone through a training class with people, or they go through some level of significant experiences, retreats, those kinds of things. That's where really deep connections are made. And so as part of the work around connections and community, that's absolutely intentional. Even with the idea that, my vision is that at some point in time, I hope not in the far too distant future, that there's a covered bridge programming and happening in every market, in every week in the United States and hopefully beyond, where you're having, these groups of people getting together. And with that, there's also a bigger picture vision of, bringing groups together a couple times a year, alumni groups, alumni cohort groups, where you go and you rent out the Gaylord Hotel for a venue, and you bring in speakers, and you bring in a bunch of pickleball nets,
Right.
and your pickleball company, pickleball, etc. And and give people an opportunity to reconnect, right? And you're absolutely right. Even down to the way that we have thought about free time and meals. We want to make sure that there's ample free time, because not everybody is an extrovert. People need some time to recharge, to regroup. But there's also some intention in even the way that we've done meals, where we're encouraging people to sit with new couples, and I say couples meaning that, the participant and the plus one, and so they get to know as many people as they can in the cohort, with that sole purpose, whether they live in the same place or not. In the world we live in now, connections are connections, right? Whether we're in person or virtual.
Absolutely.
So does retirement have to, I mean, does this training include anything like, I mean, I couldn't imagine if we were ever in that position. I just don't see us ever stop working. So what do we, I mean, that's an opportunity. It could be an opportunity to start something new that you've never done, be an entrepreneur,
Abs-
right? And
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, even down to some of the conversations we're hoping to generate, where, the greatest definition of innovation that I've ever heard is when two old ideas collide for the first time, and
Hmm.
both parties are willing to give up something in the service of progress. I just think it's a really brilliant way of looking at innovation. You think about what innovation might come from groups like this, where, you've got really smart, really talented,
Mhm.
really well schooled and well versed people who are sitting together with, sharing ideas and giving each other ideas about what their encore occupation might be. Um, and again, you kind of never know that might spur the next business, or the next nonprofit that's gonna benefit, communities. So yeah, I appreciate that thinking, because that also is part of the thinking of this program.
I love it.
Well, let me reset for everybody too. So, Authentica USA is the name of the company, and we're talking with John Briggs. He's managing partner, and I know you have another gentleman involved with you, Casey Richardson. So, you guys, it's a two-man operation. But for this program, I know you have other programs as well that you've been running for years and years. Is this priority one now for you, or do you have other programs that you're running simultaneously?
We're running simultaneously right now. Um, I think part of this is about demand, and when the demand is there, we've got a stable of people waiting in the wings who are eager and interested to participate, both as potentially guides and advisors, but also as facilitators.
Hmm.
And again, my view on this is not to hold this close to the vest for myself or for Casey, but how do we bring in more people who are interested in doing this kind of work? They know how to make connections with people. They understand the value of the work that we're doing. And um, as uh, you mentioned Sinek on one of your other podcasts, as Simon Sinek says, do business with people who believe what you believe. And so, our goal is to grow this to the point where we're going to be adding a number of people to be able to deliver these programs, again, on a regular basis all over the country.
That's awesome. That's your vision board, I guess. You got it. You got your vision fully intact. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's actually, it is. I just looked over at my vision board, and it's right next to a really great resort in Colorado, Devil's Thumb Ranch, and just under the word meditate. So it's right there.
Nice.
That's fantastic.
Nice.
That's fantastic. So, now I know that have you gone through the program yet? A full the full program?
We have not. We have three different companies that that we're talking to at this point, that we're getting, I think, pretty close with running, at the very least, a pilot, sort of customized for each of the organizations. Um, and again, we're starting on the corporate side, just as a, because we are running a business on the other side of this. We really felt like we wanted to start somewhere, and to be clear about where we were starting, not trying to bite too much off. But with that said, really all of the curriculum, um, and all of the pieces of both the week and also the extension work, or that 6 months of extension work, they're kind of uh, like supplies in your pantry, right? They're things that we've done before, and we've got lots of things in the pantry. We just decided to pick and choose from those things, which things really fit, what progression makes sense, and what outcomes we've had in the past. How do we replicate those outcomes with similar programming? So, although we haven't run a program yet, we certainly have run programs that have had sort of similar intent in many ways.
Now, so there's also the situation where you have a company like the one I work for and much smaller. We might have a targeted retirement here or there. If that's the scenario, you want to have the same kind of option for your upcoming retiree. Would you still be able to send them to one of these? Would they wait till you had enough for a cohort? I'm just trying to think. If you weren't a kind of company that could send 20 people, you could send. I got two. Is that still an option for people who are onesie twosies?
Yeah, it absolutely is, and when I think that's, in terms of the strategy and the rollout, that looks like kind of phase two for us.
Okay.
If phase one puts us in a position with corporations that have these courses running regularly, that we have a number of people up and trained, and then we have the capacity to put a date on the calendar to say, hey, look, um, there's a significant investment on our end in terms of putting these things together, and so to be able to have programs kind of already running, and then be able to add, to your point, the more public, kind of public program approach. Um, Unless there were, again, companies that, as we're having these discussions, is, if we have 10 discussions in the next week and six companies say, look, we've got three people, then look, we've got pretty close to a cohort there, right?
Yeah.
And so to be able to then reach back to those companies and say, let's put something on the calendar. But in terms of our strategic approach, we have prioritized the larger corporate endeavor, again, just to be able to substantiate the program and have it running.
I thought you had a good, you brought this up earlier about the military. I think that would be a great uh, target audience as well.
Assimilating. Yeah.
Right. Can only imagine,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You go from structure and very, rigid environment to all of a sudden not having it, and it's a free for all. It just those just don't they don't meld.
no, you're so right. For the work that we do a lot of work at Authentica around culture, and we define culture pretty simply, and it's just three things. Culture is an organization or a family or put anything in there, right? Culture exists, um, and that is a set of behaved values, not what's on the wall or the website, but how people actually show up. Second to that is a common language, and both have brought up language as something sort of substantial to this work, and you're absolutely right. By having a common language, you think about the language and the behaved values of the civilian world are very, very different than that of the military world. And then a third piece around culture is shared stories. So if all of your stories are that of your military experience, and now you're around a bunch of civilians, other than the fact that you could be the exciting toy, whatever the party favor or whatever people are wanting to talk to you because you got exciting stories. At some point, there's got to be a way to sort of blend those, and we can do that by introducing a new common language and framework at these kinds of events. Yeah, I think the other thing, Karen, that would be absolutely critical in approaching that space, which we hope to, is back to John's question around how do we staff something like that. And I
Mhm.
think having somebody with significant military experience and experience facilitating, experience in the areas of emotional intelligence, behavioral
Mm.
styles, and those kinds of things, um, you know, that's going to be an important piece for us. So we've got our eyes on somebody who I would love to bring on in a heartbeat in the case that we're able to do some work with the military.
Well, that's awesome.
That would be great.
We met a guy at pickleball camp that you might.
It's amazing how much
I did that
how
on
much of our
purpose.
lives actually all come back to pickleball. I didn't
It's
realize
crazy.
that. I'm not sure how I've survived life so far.
I know, man.
I
A
don't
lot
know
of-
either.
what a nice tribute to you as an employee too. I think it's it's almost like a badge of honor that you would get to be able to attend something like this, as opposed to maybe, I mean, what was the old standard? You get a watch and a pat on the back, and that would kind of be it. And some people it's not like it used to be in that people stay at the same company 30 and 40 and 50 years, but there are still those companies out there that have those people. And it's still very much a part of the culture that they start looking at retirement age because they need to bring in the new talent. And this would be a great way to kind of not lose that critical knowledge that they have. It's there, and the stories, and they're the ones that were there when they were putting bricks in the building, that kind of deal. You have to have those people to still share with the incoming if you're going to maintain the culture. And I think you've mentioned culture a dozen times. That is, it eats everything else for breakfast. And this is a good way to maintain it. I love it. I think it's a brilliant program. Whatever the idea, if it was so you didn't have to travel anymore, and I even love the visual. You explained what the covered bridge was, because I'm not from the Northeast, but you are, and so you've probably actually seen these things, and what a great visual. So
Wow,
you got a
thanks.
great program here, man. So if people want to find out more about this and Authentica, where should I direct them? Because we'll put all the contact information in the show notes.
That's great. Well, I would definitely refer to the show notes. We obviously be pleased to have you visit our website. Also, we're on LinkedIn, but in your show notes, we'll include even our mobile numbers. This is important work that we are going to prioritize, and we'd be excited to have conversations with folks who have similar interests. So, appreciate very much to both of you the opportunity to come on and talk about something that's become uh, something I'm really passionate about, and I have a belief that you know when I first started the business about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago now, um, I told my mom ahead of her passing that I was going to change the world with the things that she
Aw.
and my dad taught me and the things I've learned along the way. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I mean that in a way that I know that you impact one person's life and you change the world. And I believe we're onto something equally important with this work, uh, especially at a time when finally people are starting to talk about the importance of mental health, mental
Hmm.
wellness, that we all have mental wellness and mental health challenges. Um,
Mhm.
some of us have had harder or more significant moments, but the fact is, just as human beings, we're going to endure life and have these kinds of challenges. So, anything we could do to start to have an impact on that group of people, I think you're right. I think we're onto something. That's my hope.
I love it.
Yeah, what a great tribute to your mom and dad too.
Yeah.
That values don't die; they carry on. So that's awesome. And I would I'd be thrilled to talk to you again once you get the program going, and because I know that as you go, these things are, on paper they're never exactly how they are when you're there live, and see what you learn too, because I know we're all constantly learning. But this is a great program, Johnny. And thanks so much for being on. And then we're going to have, off camera talk because we got to catch up, brother.
Sounds great. Appreciate you both. Thanks for having me on.
All right,
Thanks,
bud.
Briggs.